Greetings, dear listeners. You are listening to Keeping It Real with Janine, and I just happen to be Janine. As many of you know, I have a strong connection to animals. I've done animal rehab. I've been a big rescuer. I often thought, well, maybe I should have become a vet instead of an RN, but here you go. I'm pretty successful in communicating with them, and I use frequency bioresonance to help them heal. And so today, though, my guest, Barbara Shor, is here because she's an expert animal communicator. I'm looking so forward to speaking with her. I know this is going to be fun and heartwarming. She's actually a doctor of veterinary medicine, but in 1992, she left veterinary medicine to focus on animal communication, and she's been an animal communicator ever since. In fulfillment of a lifelong dream, Barbara spent a year in East Africa working with wildlife in their natural environment. Realizing that there is so much more to animals than simply their physical bodies, she wanted to know, who are they as spiritual beings? What do they think? How do they feel? What do they know? How often have you asked that of your dog or cat? What are you thinking? This led her to pursue a path of intuitive interspecies animal communication. In-depth conversations with animals, domestic and wild, became her teachers and co-authors. Barbara's first book, Soul of the Wild, Intimate Messages from the Hearts and Souls of Elephants and Whales, was published in 2010, and she's about to publish her second book, The Wisdom of Elephants. Barbara lives in Ashland, Oregon, and she is currently co-hosting a podcast called Animals and Us, Voices of a New Paradigm with, and I hope I can pronounce her name right, Avantika Mathur. Did I do that okay?
That's very good.
Oh,
Mathur.
Okay.
Yeah, but the first part was great.
Oh, good. I worked on that for quite a while, and I figured that's what it was. So welcome, Barbara. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. How are you?
Thank you, Janine. It's so good to be here with you.
So let's start out. I always like to start out with a little background. How did you decide to become a vet instead of a nurse?
Well, I have always loved animals, and as long as I could, I was working with them as a researcher, as a dog trainer, as an ethologist, which is the study of animal behavior. Mm-hmm. So it's just been pretty much a lifelong passion and interest. Mm-hmm. So to go to veterinary school, it took me a while to get there, I will say, to want to commit to that. But it just seemed like a good idea. I mean, it was a way to be with animals and not be stuck in a university or an office or something like that. Mm-hmm. And to earn a living and to help them in any way I could. So it just made sense to go to vet school.
Did you ever, while you were still working as a vet, did you ever use homeopathics or Bach flower remedies or anything like that?
I started getting interested in it, but I didn't, at that time I wasn't doing it. That I wasn't that exposed to it. I remember in vet school back then, chiropractic wasn't even talked about much, and acupuncture was just starting. So, on our own free time, we would hear maybe one lecture about acupuncture. Mm-hmm. So now they're pretty much mainstream, but back then, we never heard about that kind of stuff.
Right. And for people who have pets that have issues, I just want to say that, well, here's a story. When I was doing wildlife rehab, I was delivered this chipmunk, and its head was pretty much 180 to where it should be. Totally turned around. And my mentors were like, oh, we're going to have to put it down. But I'm like, no, I don't know about that. I'm just not feeling it. So I took her, I didn't even know I don't know which it was now, to my chiropractor, and he used his little activator on her. And the next day she was fine.
Wow.
And I was able to let her go.
That's great.
I know. And then there's a vet here who actually she doesn't practice as a vet anymore, but she does electroacupuncture and laser. And I can't even believe I did this, but this was maybe let's see, Misty's 9, so it was maybe like 11 years ago. I ran over one of my schnauzers. I couldn't believe it. Thank God it was winter and there was a lot of snow. I don't know how he got under the wheel. Um, and the vets wanted to, it was like going to be $3,000 for x-rays. And I'm like, he's already, let's see, at that time, because he passed away at 16. So he was like 14. And I thought, I don't want to put him through that. And once again, it didn't feel like needed to be done. And a friend told me about this woman who is a vet who does acupuncture and laser. And he kept going for another 2 years. He was just fine. In fact,
Yeah.
I had her work on his sister too, because they were getting older. And it just made all the difference in the world. So, you got to think out of the box sometimes.
Exactly. I know when I left vet medicine, I got really sick and I
Mm.
was kind of out of it for maybe 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my adrenals were just shot. And so I had this fabulous practitioner, a woman, and she used, I don't remember which machine it was, but
Mm-hmm.
that a vibrational machine. And
Mm-hmm.
she used homeopathics and Bach flowers and herbs and vitamins, everything. And I learned so much from her, and
Mm-hmm.
I got really excited about it and wanted to practice that way. And I started learning some of those things. But then I went to a meeting in Hawaii,
Mm.
a veterinary meeting, holistic veterinary meeting, and met an animal communicator, and that was that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's when I do, and I'm sure you're so much better than I am, but I don't do it that much. But when I do, I feel like I'm making it up.
Oh
It's
my
like
God, that's been my biggest challenge for the last 30 years. I mean, really.
you do. And I always say because I usually when I'm working with an animal, if it's a pet, I work with the human too. And I always say, this feels like I'm just making this up, but here's what I'm getting. I've got to tell you. And when I was doing my training, there was an exam, and the client was a dog, and I was supposed to talk to the dog and find out what was going on. And I said, oh, this is so weird, but here's what I'm getting. I'm seeing the dog humping his bed. I guess that was what the problem was. I'm like, wow, maybe I can do this.
Yeah, you can get some weird stuff, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's so, I mean, it's you really have to have confidence because and having some wins really helps when you get feedback that you're right on, but it's so weird how like I say, I just feel like I'm making it all up.
Well, yeah, I think that's a stumbling block for many, many people, and it certainly has been for me. Some people see things, they're very visual and they
Hmm.
see things. Other people hear things or actually feel things. For me, most of the time, it's just like my own thoughts, and it's
Hmm.
very hard to determine, is this me thinking or is
Right.
it something coming through? But I
Hmm.
think that's the value of experience and practice is
Hmm.
you learn,
Hmm.
you learn to trust when you get enough evidence or
Right.
feedback or whatever it is to let you
Hmm.
know it's for real.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when you get feedback that behavior's changed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's so rewarding. I'm like, oh my God, I actually made a difference.
Yes. It really is. It really is. Yeah.
So how did it evolve for you then when you decided that this was what you wanted to do?
Well, it's very interesting because I'd already been communicating with dolphins for years.
Mm.
And I had been swimming with dolphins,
Hmm.
captive dolphins at that time. Later, I went and was with wild dolphins.
Hmm.
But but I've journaled for as long as I can remember, and I would just get these messages from the dolphins and write them down.
Hmm.
And they were just my teachers. They were my
Mm-hmm.
spiritual teachers. And I never knew there was such a thing as animal communication. They were just my teachers. And when I learned about animal communication, it's like it took me quite a while to figure out how I work,
Mm-hmm.
because in those days the teachers, they would say you need that animals send images, visual images,
Okay.
and that's how they send and receive. Well, I wasn't able to do that very well, so I thought I couldn't do it. And it
Mm.
took me some years before I realized how I work and that it was legitimate and
Mm-hmm.
that the dolphins are animals. So I was communicating with animals. I just didn't call it that. So it was really quite a long process of just doing it and not even telling people much about it for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And then realizing, oh, this is real. This really works. It took a while. It took a long time.
So you don't see images, you hear them speaking to you in your head?
I don't
Mm-hmm.
hear a voice. Like someone recently said she hears different voices of the
Mm.
animals or the
Mm-hmm.
trees or whatever it is. I don't hear voices like that. It is more like my own thoughts. It's very subtle. And I think maybe that's for you too. I don't know, but I think that's why it's been so difficult to believe it, because it's so much like my own thoughts and it's
Mm-hmm.
so subtle, like this quiet voice that you hear about. And that's how it is. And I
Mm-hmm.
just follow it, and a lot of my work is through writing. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like you've heard of automatic writing where
Oh,
you're,
yes. I used to, in
yeah,
fact, it's good we're talking about this because I'm thinking, why don't I do that anymore? I
yeah,
used to. And what I learned with automatic writing is you just start writing and it can be blah, 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 blah. This is really stupid. This is, this isn't going to work. And then all of a sudden it flips and you're actually communicating.
yeah,
Or like if you're trying to communicate with someone, maybe your guides or an animal or whatever, it really does. It just changes. And
exactly. And once you practice it a lot, which is, I do almost every day, I do my own journaling and I'm connecting with somebody or something.
hmm
And then it just becomes pretty automatic almost, automatic writing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I think it's so what's the word I want? Authentic.
Yeah.
You just know that it's real. It
And each person has their own signal about, when they're really tuned in and connected with someone.
hmm
For me, a lot of times it's tears. If I
mm,
have a really strong connection with an animal, I'll get teary sometimes, at
hmm
least at the beginning. And
hmm
that's a sign for me that something's happening.
Oh my
How about,
goodness. Me
yeah,
too.
you
Yeah.
too?
Yes. It's like I know, and this happens sometimes when I'm having the podcast conversations. I get this, I call it like this hit in my chest, in my heart, and I get emotional. And
Yeah.
I know that tells me I'm on the right track.
Oh, that's so cool. Most people that I've talked to don't get that. So that's very
Oh,
cool. Yeah.
look at what we're
Yeah.
learning here. Fun.
And
Uh,
sometimes it can be pretty intense, It can be
Oh
a little
yeah.
too intense.
hmm
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
sometimes I can't speak for a while. I'm just like, I like,
Yes.
wow. I said, excuse me, I'm getting really emotional here. So there's something here we need to focus on.
Yeah. I know when I was writing the elephant book, especially years ago when I was first writing my first book, and I would get these profound messages from the elephants, and I would just be quiet, crying for like an
Mm.
hour. I couldn't talk to anybody or do anything. It touched me so deeply. Yeah.
Yeah, what is it about, let's go there. What is it about elephants? I feel such a connection to them and they just seem so heartfelt. They're so compassionate, so smart, so I don't know. I really want, I'm so envious that you've gone to Africa to work with them. I really want, I that's something that's on the top of my list. That
Yeah.
what was the
Yeah.
book? It was about the
Elephant
Tula Tula.
Whisperer.
Yes. Oh my goodness. That's one of
Great
my
book.
favorite books. And for anyone who a lot of times I don't like the audibles,
Uh-huh.
but the gentleman that's narrating or reading this book is so perfect for it. I've
Oh,
I've never heard a voice so perfect for what he's reading. It's don't be afraid to do Audible if you want. It's so good.
oh,
And
that's great.
it's really one of my favorite books. I
It's a
just
wonderful book. And then he died, and there was the whole story of how the elephants came to his home and honored him. Did you know
mm,
about that?
no,
Oh
no.
yeah, it was on online. It was viral online some years ago. He died.
Hmm.
This was a guy who had rescued some rogue elephants, and they became like his family. And when he died, this whole group of elephants came from miles away
Oh my goodness.
and
Oh, I'm getting
stood
chills.
stood vigil by his house,
Mm.
and I think for a few days. And then for a couple years after that, on the very same date, they would do the same thing.
Oh my goodness.
His wife wrote a book. It's called An Elephant in My Kitchen.
Oh
And
goodness.
she talks about that. It's just pretty incredible. Yeah.
I'll have to read that because
Yeah.
yeah, wow, that just I mean, can you imagine all of these elephants coming from all over to honor him and then doing so on the anniversary of
Yeah.
his death? I mean,
It's amazing, isn't it?
everybody take that in. What kind of intelligence that that
Well,
that
I've
takes.
been working with elephants spiritually, telepathically, energetically, whatever you want to call it,
Hmm.
for years. And still to this day, I've been editing my second book, with the messages I've received from the elephants.
Mm,
Still to this day, I don't think I really get it fully who the elephants are, because
mm.
they've been my spiritual teachers. They are so wise. They're so wise. It's just unbelievable and compassionate.
Barbara, do you have a sense of why they're here on planet Earth? Are
What
they
they've
are they
taught,
from another? I mean, my sense is that they're they're not quote unquote from here, like the whales and the dolphins
yeah,
that
exactly.
that they're all from, I don't know if it's another star system or galaxy or whatever it is, but they're here but what are they here? I mean, they're all of them are so um they're so what's the word? I'm having my senior moment again. We destroy them.
Conscious,
They're
conscious.
right, but I mean, we destroy them.
Oh
We
yeah,
and I just it kills me
yeah.
when I see how they're treated a lot of times, and I'm like, why are they here? What?
Well, what they've told me, and this is what I believe, exactly what you say. They're from another star system where they initially didn't have bodies. They were part of a larger consciousness.
Hmm.
And they've come here intentionally to work with the earth. The elephants and whales have told me that they work with the grids of the earth.
Hmm.
They help to hold the earth stable, harmonious,
Oh,
and
interesting.
intact.
Hmm.
And they work with all beings who live on the earth in that way, sending this vibration of love and peace throughout the planet. And
Hmm.
so in this way too, they're helping humanity evolve.
Hmm.
And they've told me that we as humans are babies. We're pretty primitive,
Yep. Yes. Yes.
and they're helping us evolve, which
Hmm.
tells me they're pretty evolved themselves.
Right, right. Yes, I
Yeah,
do think they are very evolved. And it is my understanding that we have to evolve. We have to raise our frequency.
yeah,
That this planet is very important.
yes,
You know,
yes.
uh and no matter what people, talk about the possibility of nuclear war or whatever, the the ETs are not going to allow that, and they've already.
If they can prevent it, if they can. I
Hmm.
mean, a lot of this is up to us as human beings, you know.
Hmm.
So, yeah. But the elephants have such a beautiful, and the whales, they have such a beautiful perspective. You would think after all the abuse and exploitation that they've suffered for so long at the hands of people, they
Mm-hmm.
would be resentful and hateful, but I don't find that at all. They're extremely compassionate. And of course, they don't like what's happening or the way they've been treated, but they have such a higher perspective, and they
Mm-hmm.
and they put things in that context, and they're asking us to do the same, really, is to see the bigger picture.
Right, right. My husband likes to call it the 30,000-foot view.
Yeah.
Pigs, believe it or not, pigs are the same. I do work for it's a farm animal rescue farm
Uh-huh.
that's about 4 or 5 hours north of me. And whenever she has an issue, she gets a hold of me and I gladly help out. And they have this one pig there, Sunny. Oh my God, this poor thing is so huge. Oh, geez. I think it was some kind of a genetic experiment. And
Yeah.
and she couldn't walk. I mean, her nails were so long, they're finally able to get her nails down so that she can walk. But I mean, you can imagine how thick the nails on a big, humongous pig are, you know.
Yes.
I mean, it's hard enough for me to do my dog's nails.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, but communicating with Sunny, I just and there was another pig I was communicating with too. I was amazed how philosophical they are about life and their situation. I mean, there was no sense of anger or resentment. But just so much compassion and love and like I said, just a higher philosophy
Yeah.
that I was floored.
Wow. Yeah.
So
Yeah, we
you
have
never
no
know.
idea. We just have no, including me,
Hmm.
we have no idea who these guys really are and how brilliant and conscious they really are. It's kind of amazing.
I know. I know. So what about your time in Africa?
Yeah.
And I want everybody to know Barbara has sent me some beautiful pictures. So if you're listening to this, you might want to go and listen on BitChute or Rumble because I'm going to put at least a dozen of these beautiful pictures from Africa on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just got back in August. I was gone for 7 weeks, and I
Hmm.
went to Botswana, and then I went to South Africa.
Okay.
And in Botswana, I was on safari, and it was
Mm.
they call it a mobile tented safari
Hmm.
because we slept in tents. They were very cool tents, by the way.
I've seen
And
pictures. It's definitely upscale tenting.
upscale tenting. Even had a metal bed with a nice mattress and these wonderful blankets. It was the middle of winter, so it was cold
Oh,
at
okay.
night. Yeah. So I went on this safari for, well, a couple weeks, and then went to South Africa, where I volunteered at a big cat sanctuary called
Mm,
Panthera Africa for a month, and it was just wonderful. The whole thing was wonderful.
mm. Wow. I did well before the all the lockdowns and all this bullshit happened. I was in Costa Rica and I spent a week at the beach with a friend and then I drove all by myself. Almost got myself killed a couple times, but thank goodness I'm well looked after into the interior and I volunteered at a wildlife rescue.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
and it was really fun because with my nursing background and my wildlife rehab and energetic medicine and stuff, the wife of the vet who the two of them owned it together, she was into Bach flower remedies. So we put Bach flower remedies together for some of the animals that were having emotional issues. And it was my job to give them to the animals twice a day, which was really interesting. But I got to do things that other people don't normally do. I got to go and hold baby sloths. It was just like, oh my God. It was just so wonderful.
How
Oh,
fun is
wonderful.
that?
Oh,
That's
yeah.
great. Yeah. Yeah. I've been around a lot of captive animals like that, but I must say a lot of it was in zoos years ago
Mm.
before I really knew a whole lot about zoos
Mm-hmm.
and things. But oh my gosh, when you can win the love and trust of an animal like that, a wild animal,
Mm-hmm.
it's just hard to describe the feeling of that.
So, what is there anything in particular that you do when you're trying to, because even let's talk about domestic animals. There are animals that have emotional issues, and how do you win the trust of an animal?
Oh, um, I think you just need to be quiet and send love. You know, what I've learned about animal communication is the key that unlocks the door
Mm-hmm.
to that kind of connection and communication is just love.
Mm-hmm.
When you really, really love that animal and project that out, they get it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think you can do that energetically, when you're working even at a distance.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly in the physical, um, you don't go pushing at them and trying to force your way into their energy field, into their aura or into
Mm-hmm.
their physical being. You just take it easy and let them determine how far in you get.
Yeah, I
Because
think.
it's
Oh,
yeah,
go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, especially wild animals, they have what's called a flight distance. And
Hmm.
the minute you get too close, they're going to run away or get scared and be aggressive or whatever. So you really have to learn how to gauge that and
Hmm.
and just not intrude, just be
Mm-hmm.
respectful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
That's
think
what I
it's you have to get out of your head and into your heart.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember another experience that is like the highlight of my life. My dad and my boyfriend and I flew down. My dad was a pilot, and we flew down to Belize and spent a week scuba diving and then a week in the jungle. And then I heard that the manatees were in the river for a while still because the ocean was too cold, and I wanted to go visit. So what was it, Crystal River? So my dad finally said, "Okay, we'll refuel there." And so it was the best $10 ever spent. It was $10 for this aluminum skiff, and we got our wetsuits on and stuff and went into the river. And I just walked in and I was like, "Oh, I love you, I love you, I love you." And we spent like an hour and a half with a mom and a baby and another adult, and they would just roll around and let us scratch them and play with their little feet. It was,
Oh,
I mean, I was in heaven. And leaving, I heard people say, they didn't have any experience or anything. And I was like, "Oh, that's too bad." But, I was just going in with so much love
yeah,
that they came to us.
yeah. That's beautiful.
It
Yeah.
was extraordinary. It's like what definitely at the very top of my experience list for this lifetime.
Yeah. I got to swim with humpback whales in
Mm.
Tonga.
Oh,
And oh my God, to be next to one of those amazing creatures is just same kind of thing.
they
They're
come up. Did
just
they come up to you?
well, they didn't come up per se, but they allowed us to be in their presence and swim very close by. I was with
Hmm.
a mother and her baby,
Hmm.
and I told that story in the first book of what that was like.
Why
Just
didn't you tell us?
well, I don't know if there's a lot to tell. I was there for 2 weeks in
Hmm.
Tonga, specifically to be with the whales, and I had heard that there's whales everywhere and you're swimming with them every day and all this stuff. Well, that didn't happen. I think we were kind of at the end of their time there.
Mm.
It was,
Hmm.
I guess, in August or September, and there were whales, but we would go out every day on the ocean and get ready to get in the water, and they just swim away. They didn't want a whole lot to do with us. So this was the very last day. And it was an optional day. We could either go on the boat or not go on the boat. And I had been so frustrated and discouraged. I was just really broke down the day before. And I just said, okay, I'm done. If you're not coming, I'm not putting this book out. I don't think any of my connection is true. And I just let it all go. I said,
Wow.
okay, I'm done. And it was the last day. And I just said, do I really want to go out again? I get seasick too. I always get seasick.
Oh
I
dear.
thought, do I really want to go out again? Am I just, going to get disappointed? And I thought, no, I just want to have a good time on the water. It's a beautiful day and I'm going. And that was the day that we got to swim with this mother whale. She, there was another boat before us who had been near her, and I think you can only spend an hour in their presence
Okay.
there. And we went out, and I was one of the first ones in the water. I don't scuba dive, I just snorkel. But oh my God, she was right near the surface, swimming very, very slowly so we could stay with her. And I went in 3 different times, and each time I got closer and closer to her head, and I was taking pictures underwater and just like, oh my God, to look in her eye and see that baby going up and down by her head, because
Oh
they
my
have to
goodness.
breathe more often. And I got out, and Trish, who was leading this group, she and I just hugged each other and jumped up and down in tears. We were so excited.
Oh my
And
goodness.
and then I started writing, and I called her Mother Whale, and I just wrote to her for years. Still, she's a friend to me, just so beautiful. It was quite wonderful. Yeah.
Wow. Now, Barbara, I have to ask, because this is a very large animal.
Mm-hmm.
And you're in the water, not your, not your main surroundings where you're comfortable. Um, were you scared at all?
I knew you were going to say that. I wasn't at all.
Yeah.
I wasn't. She was so calm. And I guess I just sensed there was no animosity whatsoever. And I was just happy. Yeah.
Wow. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think
so
it was, I remember when I was swimming with dolphins. And one time my mother went with me. This was early on. I think the first time I swam with dolphins, my mother went with me. And there are these huge dolphins, swimming around in this tank. It was in a tank then. And my mother was just too scared to get in the water. But I got in and I was in seventh heaven. They were all over me and just everywhere. And oh my God, I just was so happy.
they know. They really do know.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
it, I think what we're doing now, speaking words, is very, it's not the highest order of communication.
No,
Let's
it's
put it
not.
that way.
It's not. My hope in the books that I
Mhm.
write, my deepest hope is that people will sense that connection and they'll be able to form their own connection with these animals, not just me and my words or the animals' words, but really feel who they are and have their own a relationship with them. That would be my highest hope for my writing. Yeah.
Well, and we're surrounded by animals, whether it's domestic or just the birds outside, or
It's
where
true.
I am, bobcats and cougars and bears, and in
Yeah.
fact, damn
Yeah.
bear ate almost all my apples this year. I'm so mad.
Oh,
I'm like, all that work, I didn't realize it. We had the gate open because my husband was redoing the entry gate, and he was. Oh no, I remember the gate was closed, but I think it's a he, was able to open it and come in and then just push it and go out. So I didn't realize that he was even coming in. And then I went to go check the apples, and I'm like, where are all the apples?
Yes.
What and what about the plums? Where'd all the plums go? And
he was he was
yeah,
hungry.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then getting ready for winter, right?
Yeah.
And then I start seeing bear poop around, and I'm like, oh, geez,
Yeah.
it's like all the work it takes to grow all this stuff. I couldn't believe it. I actually ended up because we have an apple press,
Uh-huh.
and oh, the fresh apple juice is just so good. And I use those wine bags that where you can get all the oxygen out, and I fill those, and then I put them in the freezer. And then, during the winter, we take them out one at a time. I actually bought friggin' apples to press because my husband really likes fresh apple juice in the winter. I'm like,
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm buying apples. This is so ridiculous
Yeah.
because there should
Yeah.
have been plenty. And so many people here don't have fencing, and they end up getting, some of their livestock killed and stuff. And I'm like, you're out in the bush. You have to have fencing if you're going to
Yeah.
have
Yeah,
animals.
you do.
We're in their territory,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. So it's our responsibility to take care of what's ours, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned domestic animals. I've worked with a lot of domestic animals as well. It's not just the wild
Mm-hmm.
ones.
Okay.
And people need to realize just how brilliant their own animals are. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they know what's going on a lot of the time, even more than we do. And they're pretty amazing too.
They really are. I mean, if you, I think they know. I mean, like I know my animals, they know when I'm upset.
Yep.
You just, if you pay attention to their behavior, it's usually about us.
Yep.
And I know my dog, she's had so much training, it's ridiculous. But her thing is that when she gets excited, it's very hard for her to control herself and stop. She just doesn't have an off button. And she gets very excited when there are other people and other dogs. She just, she loves everybody. But I've noticed that when somebody comes over who's calm, she's much different than with somebody who's kind of hyper and their energy's all over the place. And she's jumping all over them and won't leave them alone. And yet then somebody else comes over who's much more calm. Their their energy isn't so wild, and she's much calmer around them.
Yeah, they're very sensitive to energy.
They really are. So I think the whole idea of when there's a behavior problem with a pet, probably the first place to start is with the owners.
Yeah. Yep. It's often true. Yep. Or the people just kind of exacerbate what's already there. You know, they
Mm-hmm.
aggravate the issue. And not to blame people because some of these animals are quite challenging.
Oh yes.
But they do pick up our energy, even physical problems. As a veterinarian, I would see this quite often where the animal would display symptoms that are either similar to that of the person
Mm-hmm.
or based in the same emotion that the person's going through. And that's part of their service is to take on some of our issues and and help us deal with them. Or you know I haven't
Right.
found a way to keep them from actually taking these things on. It's just part of what they do, but we
Right.
can certainly reassure them that we're okay and it's not their job to take it all on themselves. Yeah.
Right. And do you think they're here too to help us with our lessons?
No question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they are spiritual beings.
Mm-hmm.
I think most people don't think of them that way. They're these little hairy things with four legs, but they're spiritual beings just like we are.
Yeah.
And they have their own lessons to learn as well. I mean, they do take on our stuff, yep,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but they have their own lessons too. And I think it's important to honor them that way.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Oh, I know. I've got a good question for you because I've heard two different sides of the story here. So I've learned from let's see, I'm trying to think if it was I think it was my communication teacher, Danielle McKinnon, that animals will not reincarnate into another body. Like a lot of people will say, oh, this, my dog that died 10 years ago, this is, it's come back to me. That they will train another animal to be your pet, and help them to understand what your needs are, but they won't specifically come back to you. What do you think?
I kind of don't agree with that.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard both, so I was just
Yeah.
wondering what your take is.
From my experience, uh, they can even go from animal to human and vice versa occasionally,
Mm-hmm.
or they can take on a different species,
Mm-hmm.
or
Right.
an animal can come back to the same person. Maybe they were. I had this experience once, and it was pretty really interesting and really strong energy behind it. Really,
Mm-hmm.
I got some really strong validation for this. But
Okay.
the one had been a dog, came back as a cat.
Okay.
So that can happen, I
Mm-hmm.
believe. And I've
Mm-hmm.
heard many people talk about how they had a particular dog, for instance, who came back years later. Um, similar behaviors, similar likes and dislikes, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think
Well,
it's possible.
yeah, and some people feel that like dogs, we'll say dogs and cats, can't reincarnate as a human. But then I've also read that especially animals, and it can be wild animals too, who have connection with humans and are much more likely, they can choose if they want to come back as a human. And in fact, what did somebody say? I don't know if they were joking or not, but they're talking about the dog. They see you feeding them, and say you give them canned food, taking the food out of the tin, and they the thought is that they could do that themselves, not have to have a human do it for them. So they want to come back as a human. I thought that was cute.
That'd be an interesting reason to incarnate. My gosh. Yeah, but I think, what the elephant said too is there's no ultimate truth. We each have
Mm-hmm.
our own opinions, our own beliefs, our own filters.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think it's important just to stay open,
Yeah, I agree.
possibilities.
Yes. And especially in this day and age when there is so much information out there about all the stuff that's going on in the world. And, a lot of it, like we were talking a little bit before we started the recording, I said, I just put a lot of this information in my we'll see file cabinet in my
Yeah,
head. And,
yeah,
I don't just go, oh, that can't be, because you just don't know. I mean, there are just so many things that you think just couldn't be. There's so many
right,
behaviors that people do and things that are happening that you just think that can't be, and then you
right.
find more and more uh, information that corroborates that it is. So I don't, I don't just go, no. I go, well, I don't know, but let's see if that's corroborated or not, and we'll file it away.
Well, and the other thing is to trust your own instincts,
Mm-hmm.
your own intuition,
Right.
because that's a really powerful discernment tool that
Mm-hmm.
we have. Is just trusting what feels true.
Right.
And I
And
think,
I think you just said the right word, feels true. Because
mhm,
if you use your mind, and I haven't said this in a while, but I've said this before, your mind can justify anything.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right. So it's really important to come from your heart and see, how it feels to you, if it feels right or not.
that's right. Yeah. And like I talked about, a validation signal for me is getting teary sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's really good to learn what your own personal validation signs are to know if something feels true to you.
Yes, I agree. I think that's wise. So,
Yeah.
what would you say for someone who would really love to be able to communicate with animals, or even trees, or, anything? What would you say is some of the first steps for them? Besides getting your book, they should get your book, of course. But
Yeah, right.
What's the title of your book again?
Well, this one that's going to be coming out, who knows when? I hope it's in the next couple months. It's the second in the Soul of the Wild series is what I'm
Okay.
calling it, book
Soul of
two.
the Wild. Okay.
Soul of the Wild, book two, and it's called, and the subtitle is The Wisdom of Elephants.
Awesome. Awesome.
I think the most important, there's a few more important things. One
Okay.
is to get quiet, just
Mm-hmm.
really get quiet and go inside and ask,
Mm-hmm.
just start asking and trust what you get. You might be wrong. Okay, so then you try again, but you need to start really trusting what you receive. And I think the more you do it and the more you trust it and the more you learn to sense what feels true,
Mm-hmm.
the easier it becomes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing. Another thing that I would like to emphasize, I don't know that most people do, I think it's really important to do your own inner healing work. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
emotional healing,
Mm-hmm.
physical healing too, but emotional healing. If you have certain wounds and you're communicating with the animal, you can project your own fears and sadness and anger and all of that onto the animal and think it's coming from them when actually it's your
Mm-hmm.
own. So I think
Interesting.
it's really important to do your own work so that you can determine what's yours and what's not,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
not put that on somebody else. So I think that's an important piece.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we'll never heal everything, but just to do as much as you can to get your inner world as quiet as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then just sit in with an animal or with a picture of an animal or even in just a meditation and send love, send
Mm-hmm.
lots of love. And I feel like the one of the really important ways to connect with an animal is through intention.
Mm-hmm.
You intend to connect with a particular animal or group of animals, and you direct your energy in that direction,
Mm-hmm.
and then give it your focus and attention.
Yes.
You're not thinking about what you're going to cook for dinner or
Mm-hmm.
the pain in your knee or whatever. You're focusing on that animal with love and an intention to connect at a deep level. So
Yes.
those are the some of the basics that I would say.
Mm-hmm. And made me think of something too. Open-ended questions. So if you feel unsure,
Mm-hmm.
like you can't do this, open-ended questions for anything are really good. And you're not looking for the answer. You're just asking open-ended questions. So it would be like, what would it feel like if
Yeah.
I could communicate with an animal? How would I know if I was communicating with an animal? What would I do? Just kind of stream of consciousness, open-ended questions that, like I said, you're not expecting an answer, but it triggers something in your brain that that helps to move you forward.
Yeah.
And yeah, just and you can do it with anything.
Yeah.
And say maybe you're out of work and you want a job, and what would it look like for me to have the best job for me that I really liked? How would I feel? What would I be thinking? What would that kind
Mm-hmm.
of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
And when you are in conversation, it is a conversation. It's not like you're throwing out a bunch of questions to an animal and
mhm,
expecting a whole bunch of answers, and there's no two-way dialogue.
mhm.
For at least from my perspective, the way I've worked is I have a full conversation.
Right.
Like, how do you feel about such and such, and what do you think about this? And you wait for their response, and then talk to them just like you and I are having a conversation. It's the same thing.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And I also this is something that a lot of times I don't have a picture of the animal.
Uh-huh.
And what I found is I don't know if they're joking around or what, but they like sometimes like a little, maybe a little chihuahua or a little dachshund or something will come to me and show me as like this big, huge animal. Like it's their personality, really, right?
Uh-huh.
They
Yeah.
but they're really small, or they'll show me, like if they're elderly, they'll show me themselves like when they were young and spry and healthy, So
Yeah.
I guess the reason I'm bringing that up is, don't feel like you failed if what you're picturing isn't what the animal actually is right now at the moment. There may be a reason why they're
That's
showing you something
great.
different.
And it brings up something for me too, is sometimes I'll be with an animal who's wired, a dog that's just jumping around and can't control himself, like you were talking about. And I get inside, I get quiet and I start connecting with them energetically. I like to connect energetically first before I start plowing a bunch of questions at them.
Oh yeah.
And see who they are and ask for permission. That's
Mm-hmm.
another thing. And I also
Mm-hmm.
protect myself, put a bubble of light around me and ask for help from my guides
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
angels and everything, and certainly my own soul.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I'll get in there and this dog is perfectly quiet inside, or there'll be this dog that seems totally bored with life, or cat, and they're just kind of hanging out, and you get inside and there's all this energy and enthusiasm. So you can't always gauge from what you see,
Right.
And the other thing that I would like to bring up
Uh-huh.
is that I used to expect that if I were communicating with an animal, they would respond to me physically. They'd come over and they'd
Mm-hmm.
sit in my lap, or they'd, come right next to me and they'd do this and do that. But that's not necessarily true.
Mm-hmm.
You can be communicating on a deep level with an animal and they're not acknowledging you at all,
Right.
because you're talking in their inner world and they might be focused in their outer world.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really challenging but important not to have any expectations or assumptions of how it's going to be. Just come in
That's
with an open mind.
that's probably one of the most important things you said. It is
Yeah.
to is really is to don't have any expectations.
Yeah,
Just let it flow and see what wants to happen.
exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, this has been so much fun. I really
Yeah,
enjoyed it. How can people, do you have a website? How can
I
people?
do. I do. It's very simple. It's barbarashor.com,
Okay.
and it's BARBARASHOR. There's no E on there.
Mm-hmm.
SHOR.com. That's my website.
Okay.
And like you mentioned in the beginning, I have a podcast with Avantika, and that's been really fun,
Oh, good.
as you know from your
Mm-hmm.
podcast. And we've interviewed some really fascinating people who work with animals in interesting ways, in very conscious ways. And that is animalsanduspodcast.com.
Okay.
And our podcast is on most of the venues I know about anyway, Apple and Spotify, and what
Mm-hmm.
are the other ones? Anyway, the
Oh, I don't know.
common ones.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been fun. And our intention really is to talk about animal consciousness, animal communication, and and just open people's minds to new thoughts and new ideas about animals.
Mm-hmm. Fun. That's great. And is there any other social media or anything that people can connect with you?
Oh, no. Well, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, but I'm not a big social media person, so
Yeah, me
I
either.
don't go on there a lot.
It's too much. It takes too much time, too much effort.
It's too, yeah, and I'm too old for that
Yeah,
stuff.
me too.
Can't keep up. Yeah, I wish I were really tech savvy and I just knew exactly what I were doing, but Avantical handles all that stuff for our podcast, and it's just
Oh,
not my
that's
thing.
great. That's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, there's only so many hours in the day, and I feel like I spend way too much time. In fact, I was thinking about that today because the biofeedback bioresonance program that I use, Genius Insight, is on my on a mini iPad. So I'm on a screen for that. And then, it's like I'm on a screen for so many things. And I feel like it's good I live out in the boonies. So at least I can look out at trees and I'm outside and I have to go out and take care of the chickens. And,
Yeah. The coolest thing of the whole day was when you showed me your chicken.
Peanut.
And Peanut, and how Peanut hangs out with you in the house. I thought it was so cool.
I should take a picture of her because she's right here. And I've got a little towel down for her, and she's like making a nest out of it. She's pulling it towards her, and she's in front of my printer. I'll have to, because I'm in a Zoom group on Monday nights, and Peanut is part of the Zoom group. She has to always be there, and everybody's got to see her. So. Yes, she is. Great. I'll tell everybody what she is when they see the picture. She's a mille-fleur duckle.
Oh my gosh.
And she's what they call a banty, which is basically a miniature chicken. So she lays a little egg. Well, she doesn't anymore. She doesn't lay anymore, but it's like 2 eggs are the size of a good sized egg. So generally, because people love our eggs, because in the winter I make sprouts for them, and blah blah blah, they're well cared for, so everybody likes the flavor of my eggs. So I can barely keep up, because really I don't think the majority of the girls actually lay, because they're too old now. We eat the banty eggs mostly so that I can sell the big ones to people. I don't come first, what can I say?
And she's beautiful too. She's so beautiful.
Yeah, she is. I'll take a picture of her before.
Okay. Good idea.
Yeah, Peanut.
Yeah.
Such a nut. Well, thank you so much, Barbara. This has been really fun for me. I hope it's been fun for the listeners.
It's been fun for me too. Yeah,
good.
I hope other people enjoy it too.
Good. Great.
Yeah.
Everyone, thank you so much for listening. And I thank so much Barbara Shor for her heartfelt messages from animals, and that the work that she's doing that I think is so important for the world, especially for the animal kingdom and for humans. It's so important for us to have this kind of connection with animals. I think it's part of our growth spiritually. The podcast website is realjanine.com. There you can listen to and download episodes. You can also listen to slideshow videos on BitChute and Rumble. And please remember to subscribe while you're there. And if you're on Rumble, give me a rumble. Do you know someone who would find my conversation with Barbara Shor inspiring and uplifting? I'm sure you do. So please share the love. We would all appreciate it. And until next time, take care and be well.